Seat 14. Seat 26.
Testing, testing. Yes.
Mo is busy.
Delegates, if you can take your seats, especially Ambassador Nasser. Oh, you didn't hear me. So colleagues, as you recall yesterday, we had a room that not everybody could fit in. Today we have a room everybody can fit in and nobody came, so. Yeah. So if the room is too full, there's an overflow on the top on the balcony if you'd like. Okay, we will continue from where we left off yesterday, and Fiona will continue chairing this session. Fiona?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Hope you're all well. So, following on from our discussions yesterday, we plan to proceed with the speakers list since we weren't able to conclude with everyone's interventions. I'd like to start today with Japan, followed by Barbados, Panama, China, and Morocco. So the way we will do this is that as we go speaker by speaker, if you can please just press the right button in front of you, that will turn your microphone on. Can I please ask that others don't press it at the moment? And we will just go speaker by speaker. So can we please start with Japan?
I'm sorry. Now, yes. Thank you, Co-Chair, for your dedicated work. We are at the critical moment in our shared objective to keep 1.5 degrees within reach and scale up investments and climate action from all sources, public and private, domestic and international, in order to meet the needs and the priorities in developing countries. Some countries showed yesterday their concern about what to aim at in NCQG, but I would like to stress that we remain committed to take into account those needs and priorities as we set the NCQG in Baku. In that sense, we all parties need to work constructively to achieve the NCQG, which is satisfying for all parties. We ask our co-chairs to streamline the document to make it simpler, easier to read, and a better basis for the substantive discussions in the sessions ahead. This should be technical only. We ask that you do not remove existing suggestions, but streamline to remove duplications and repetitions without losing nuances and everyone's ideas. Based on that, we could move forward to deepen the discussion positively and constructively about substantive elements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. Next, I have Barbados.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues all. I want to take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs and the Secretariat for the extremely hard work that you've put in to produce a text from our various ramblings that have been submitted and all efforts to streamline. I think all of the groups and the parties have sought to have a constructive approach to things to date, even though we are not on the same page on a number of issues. We wish to align ourselves with the statement from G77 in China and AOSIS, and it is certainly our belief that all of the parties in this room want to bring us as close to an effective solution going forward into COP29 as is possible, and none of us want to see this issue move strictly into the political realm where I can almost guarantee that none of us will be happy with the overall outcome. We need to commit to be realistic, however, in what can be guaranteed to be delivered, and there's a need to recognize the special circumstances of SIDS and LDCs in this respect. The reality is that when you look at things from a SIDS lens, we're the ones who can lose more than 200% of our GDP in one event. When we face an event, our entire island, all of our peoples and our way of life is what is at risk. And let us not fool ourselves. Given the size of our economies and the fiscal space constraints that we have, there's absolutely no chance that we could spend all of the money that comes into an NCQG, even if it were a paltry sum in larger terms. But our needs need to be recognized. In addition to that, we have concerns relative to the inclusion of Article 21C when we are still in such delicate discussions relative to that. And I certainly don't want to be in a position where colleagues, and I will not in any way call Gabby's name, would like us to buy a pig or a horse in a bag. We need to reiterate the fact that, like it or not, the NCQG cannot be all things to all people, and it needs to be, therefore, in our minds, focused on supporting developing countries in a guaranteed matter, cognizant of the disenablers that currently confront us. There are other bodies of work that are pursuing the broader financial architecture challenges, such as the Bridgetown Initiative and the need for that reform that is so essential. And we need to recognize that the UNFCCC space does not cover all of the areas that we need to cover. I would encourage you all to deliver an NCQG that seeks to realistically address our obligations under the Paris Agreement and the Convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbados. Next, I have Panama, followed by China. Panama, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Panama is speaking on its national capacity. On my first point, I would like to thank the Co-Chair for their hard work, orienting the technical expert dialogue and the ad-hoc work program meetings. As you may know, many countries in our region are facing the economic burden of financing the impacts of climate change through debt. Let me share with you the recent event that Panama is facing. As the SBI chair mentioned at the open plenary of the SBs 3 days ago, an entire island in Panama and of the indigenous community is sinking. The relocation of these communities was achieved through loans costing millions of dollars to Panama. This is a figure that Panama cannot sustain through debt, sorry for that, and negatively impacting our financial stability, and also it is weakening our macroeconomy. It is creating fiscal burden for our future generation and also compromising the country's future budget. This is a clear example of how inadequate climate finance instruments can generate negative impacts in our countries. And for this, and that's why it's a reason that the new collective quantified goal on climate finance should have a response to loss and damage alongside mitigation adaptation effort, considering the needs for scaling up public and grant-based finance for the adaptation and also response for loss and damage. Lastly, for Panama, it will be important to ensure that the resources provided under the NCQG will truly reach to the ground and also facilitate access for local affected communities, and that include children, youth, women, and especially indigenous people that are getting impact right now in Panama. And also the new collective quantified goal can provide us an opportunity to change this course and ensure that we are meeting the needs of the most vulnerable people and by addressing human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Panama. Next, I have China, followed by Morocco. China, you have the floor.
Oh, good. Thank you, Chair. As we negotiate the most important and the first financial goal under the CMA, one that is almost a decade overdue, to implement finance provision within the Convention and its Paris Agreement, I would like to emphasize the clear responsibility of developed countries as also outlined in Article 4 of the Convention and Article 2 and 9 of the Paris Agreement. In case someone in this room has forgotten the agreed language, let me read out for you. So Article 4.3 of the Convention said the developed country parties and other parties and other developed parties, including in Annex 2, shall provide new and additional financial resources to meet the agreed full costs incurred by developing country parties in complying with their obligations. The implementation of this commitment shall take into account the need for adequacy and predictability in the flow of funds, in the importance of appropriate burden sharing among the developed country parties. And also in Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement, developed country parties shall provide financial resources to assist developing countries parties with respect to both mitigation and adaptation in continuation of their existing obligation under the Convention. These provisions explicitly state the obligation of developed nations to support developing countries in climate actions. NCQG is continuation of the 100 billion commitment which was initially adopted in Decision 2, CP15 back in 2009. In the context of meaningful mitigation actions and transparency on implementation, developed countries committed to jointly mobilize USD 100 billion per year by 2020 to address the need of developing countries. As we all witness, developed countries have failed to achieve the 100 billion annual targets for 14 consecutive years. This persistent shortfall has deeply disappointed developing countries and demonstrated a lack of willingness by developed countries to fulfill their commitment. Report from organizations such as Oxfam highlights this ongoing issue. Our gathering here today is a testament to the intention and willingness of developed countries to adhere to this mandate in NCQG. It's proactive that developed countries fulfill their obligations to provide and mobilize climate support to developing countries in line with principles and provision of Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement and Article 4 of the Convention. The NCQG is not a voluntary contribution, it is a responsibility under the Convention. Similarly, the 100 billion commitment made in Copenhagen in 2009 is an obligation for developed countries to fulfill under the Convention. It is crucial that we recognize and act upon this responsibility to ensure that we meet the goal of the Paris Agreement and support the developing countries in our climate efforts. Now let me reflect in some substantial points. First, Paris Agreement Article 21C is not the mandate for NCQG. There is no 21C mentioned in all decision and all mandate. We would like to remove paragraph related to 21C or to change it to Article 2. Secondly, we have repeatedly hearing developed country representatives emphasize that they will take the lead. However, without providing a necessary financial commitment, it is unclear how this leadership can effectively demonstrate it. We would like to understand how leadership can show without fulfilling the financial obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Next, I have Morocco.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for your dedicated works. Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. Morocco would like to support the statements of Argentina done yesterday on behalf of the entire G77 in China. And also, I echo Ambassador Nasser of the African group and Mohammed Ayoub of the Arab group as a member of those groups. And we would like to align with many of the general views shared across the G77 and China family, especially the enhancement of adequacy, transparency, predictability, and accountability, including a definition of climate finance, burden sharing framework, and 5 years cycle for adjustments on the basis of the evolving needs and priorities. We do support calls for streamlining and thank the co-chairs for your efforts thus far. We would like to affirm, and as we did in Cartagena, that this is not the occasion to challenge or debate fundamental interpretation of the Paris Agreement or the Convention. The NCKG ad hoc work program is not an appropriate forum for renegotiating the Paris Agreement and the Convention. It would be a mistake to hold the whole NCKG process hostage to such debate over mandates. We believe that the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal and the African communities that are suffering from loss and damage can't wait. The mandates for the NCKG stipulate accordance with Paris Agreement Article 9.3. So, Article 9.3 is very clear that developing countries must take the lead. This work program is mandated to deliver a new collective quantified goal for mobilizing climate finance from developed countries to developing countries, following on the extension of the $100 billion. As our dear friend from Oasis reminded us in Cartagena, this goal will not cure cancer, but it can't do everything. Although the NCKG does indeed aim to support 2.1c, it must do so in terms of provision and mobilization of climate finance flows. We believe the NCKG must acknowledge the disabling structural challenges faced by developing countries, such as unilateral measures. However, we do concede that the proper forum for addressing them is under the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue on 2.1c. In this same spirit, the NCKG work program is not the proper place to impose additional obligation on developing countries or discussion on national policy measures. In closing, we affirm that the central element of this whole process is climate justice. Why do we insist on not wasting time on issues outside the core mandate of the NCKG, which can be addressed in other fora? We believe that time is running out. Despite the quantum being the central question on the NCKG, we have made just very little progress on this front. This is because we have been spending too much valuable time on issues that are outside the core mandates. We must see progress on identifying a quantum as soon as possible. Like many developing countries, we are here because we see and we believe the NCKG as a vehicle for justice. We do not see it as a space for weakening the core principle of the common but differentiated responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morocco. Colleagues, there's a number of parties and groups who have now requested the floor because not all of you are sitting behind your country flags and it's just numbers that come up here. I'm going to read the names of the parties and groups. I ask that you don't press the button until I read out your country name, and then when it's your turn to speak, please just press the button on your right. So first I have Pakistan, followed by the Marshall Islands, then Ecuador and the Russian Federation. So Pakistan, to you first.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And thank you for giving the floor. Basically, I raised the flag yesterday, but I had to raise my flag again. Sorry for that. First of all, I would like to thank you for your efforts in the compilation and jotting down the more than 60 pages text. Accolades to you. I would like to also identify and endorse the statement made by Argentina yesterday on behalf of the G77 and China. Madam Co-Chair, though the document at hand has no status at the moment and is a mere reflection of ideas, and even given this fact, there are some items and ideas that are legally not in synchronization with both the Mainframe Convention and the Paris Agreement. Some of the ideas allude to the suggestion that financing has to be arranged by the developing countries or by various economic and financial entities within the developing countries. My delegation finds this allusion very erroneous, as per the stipulates of the Paris Agreement, and there are mainly, my delegation thinks that there are mainly two sets of parties within the convention and also to the Paris Agreement. The one party is the developing parties, and the other one is the developed parties. The developing parties are here to offer their cooperation, endeavors, and multifarious efforts, whereas the developed parties have the finances and the technology. And they agreed on this arrangement in lieu of their predominant role in creating the present-day climate exigency. This fact and role is engraved in stone. Some parties have given the impression that previous history has changed and that things have to be done in a new order. Madam Co-Chair, historical facts are there to stay till eternity, and so is the arrangement, and the arrangement has not changed so far. The responsibility to provide finances is of the developed world, whether it comes through public funds or through resources indicated in Article 9 of the Paris Agreement. They have to flow out of the GDP and GNP of the respective developed party countries. These finances should not be provided with a view to make business and interest, as is the de facto case now. Presently, the positive flow of capital is from the developing parties to the developed parties and not vice versa. This should change under the new NCQG regime that is to be ushered in. Any party that wants to chip in as a philanthropic favor or as a pro bono is another matter and does not fall within the, domain of the agreement. Secondly, in order to be very transparent on the upcoming regime, I think my delegation thinks that there should be a very definite definition of what is climate finance. Because presently what is happening is that even finances that are to be secured by the OECD countries under their agreement for contribution to development of developing parties is being considered as climate finance, which is not correct. Madam Co-Chairs, the paper in the paper that's been floated, the ideas are also skewed towards mitigation, overshadowing the process of adaptation. The Paris Agreement mandates a balanced approach towards both the processes. The NCQGs must take this balance, must make this balance right, both for mitigation, adaptation, and or for the loss and damage. Madam Co-Chair, each idea in the paper must not contradict the principles of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. Prior to drafting any meaningful text or at a later stage a decision text, an exercise be carried out to identify items not in consonance with the agreement. Madam Co-Chair, we as a developing country are spending a lot on climate action on our own, and the same is the case with all the other developing countries. As a single instance or example, I can quote that our Green Park Sun program is a $1 billion US program, which we are spending from our own resources. Nobody has helped us. It's coming out from our own budget. And under that project, we have already planted 2.2 billion trees. So if the corresponding finance offered by the Convention and the Paris Agreement is not available and as specified, why would we need to come to this convention? So our request is that in order for us to cooperate and in order for us to continue this cooperation, it is necessary that a very balanced NQG's regime should be ushered in. And secondly, I would say that our developed partners have the ability to make things right on their own, and they can do it on their own. And if they think that they do not have the ability to fund from their own public resources, they should plainly tell us that we cannot do that, so that we may take some other actions. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Pakistan. Next, I have the Marshall Islands. What's that number? 62. Which is number 62. No. You just need to press the button, I believe. Apologies. Number 111.
Okay. Thank you, co-facilitator. Since it is our first time taking the floor, allow me to express my delegation's full support to you and your co-facilitator for the substantial task you have in front of you. At the outset, we align ourselves with a statement by Argentina on behalf of G77 in China and by Samoa on behalf of AOSIS. Colleagues, this year must be a transformative one for climate finance if we are going to keep 1.5 alive and protect the most vulnerable, including SIDS like my home. I was personally very closely involved in the preparation of RMI's NAP, which we launched at COP28 last year. For us, this is not simply a national adaptation plan, it is a national survival plan. And we urgently need the financial support to make it a reality. That is what we are really talking about here. It's literally a matter of finance for our survival. Co-facilitators, we join others in placing our trust in you to move forward with streamlining the text. As noted by the AOSIS chair, we have a clear expectation that this will take into account all aspects of our most recent submission. However, we would like to highlight some points from that submission that we think are particularly essential to the transformative outcome we need this year. First, the NCQG must speak to the need for urgent action in this critical decade, particularly the need to transition away from fossil fuels. We all agreed to that last year. This year, we need to align our climate finance and our international financial architecture to make it a reality. For one thing, it should go without saying that any financial flow that expands or perpetuates fossil fuel production is not climate finance. Developing countries that are stepping up to lead this transition, despite a complete failure from most developed countries to do so, should absolutely not be financially punished for doing so. RMI is not a fossil fuel producer, but we are committed to doing everything we can to protect the interests of those developing countries that are producers and that are doing the most to protect our common future. Co-facilitators, it should also go without saying that loans at market rates are not climate finance. We must confront the debt burdens on developing countries if we are to empower the climate ambition we need. This is the year for the UNFCCC to speak with one voice on the need to address this critical issue in all of the places it needs to be addressed. Finally, we cannot stress strongly enough the need for urgent action on access issues, particularly on the unique challenges for SIDS and LDCs. Again, I have experienced firsthand the repeated, frustrating challenges that countries like mine face when we try to access an international financial system that has been designed by and for countries many times our size. Our AOSIS submission has a high level of detail on the changes we need to see as SIDS, and we hope that this can form the basis for our collective discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marshall Islands. Next, I have Ecuador, which is number 053.
Thank you, co-chairs. My delegation aligns with the remarks delivered by the G77, the LMDC, and Group Sur. We thank you for the inputs paper, that we take it as a compilation of views that will serve for the drafting of what we hope to be a concise decision. Co-chairs, we believe the NCQG should be a communicable outcome in a way that other forums are able to replicate it, like was the case of the 100 billion goal in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In this sense, on the structure, ideally, the decision should have 3 paragraphs. One that recalls the mandate, one that establishes the quantum and the time frame, and one that mandates the track of progress. Co-chairs, we should focus on the mandate. Therefore, the NCQG should be focused on the delivery of public finance from developed countries to developing countries. We call, therefore, upon developed country parties to make proposals on quantum during this session so we can advance in the negotiations. Finally, co-chairs, the NCQG must be broad enough to address the climate change vulnerabilities of all developing countries from all regions, including the specific challenges of middle-income countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ecuador. Next, I have the Russian Federation, which is number 147.
Dear Co-Chair, thank you for the opportunity to share our views on the input paper, which required substantial efforts from the Secretariat. We believe that the document includes many valuable ideas. At the same time, the input paper is too long, unstructural, and consists of too many aspects which do not directly connect it with NCQG. So our proposal is to concentrate only on NCQG. First of all, the role of NCQG is implement principle of Article 8 of Paris Agreement. We should not try to solve other problems in the paper. We agree with many ideas discussed yesterday that the paper should include different aspects, for example, quantitative and qualitative elements. We should be one layer. Easy approach is also welcome because it is more transparent and all positions should be correspond to Paris Agreement language. We see varieties of views concerning sources of financing. Let us clarify that we should distinguish financial flows in Article 9 and Article 2.1c of Paris Agreement. When we are considering NCQG, sources of financing might be more limited. Really, the logic of Article 9 is clear, supporting climate transformation, mitigation and adaptation in developing countries. So sources of financing are limited and include international financial flows. Some of them are grants, some might be based on subsidized interest rates. It is difficult to consider private financing on market terms in NCQG due to high transactional costs, high interest rates, as well as we should pay attention to macroeconomic situation in developing countries, including high debts, budget constraints, high inflation in some developing countries. The climate finance in national currencies is also welcome, but it should be determined for every case individually, depending on national circumstances. Climate transformation is important for the whole world, and NCQG should not become additional instrument for developed countries to get benefits over the rest of the world through using their financial and technological resources, as well as unilateral restrictive measures. So mentioning of unilateral measures in point 469 is also important. On the other side, NCQG should be realistic for advanced economies, and we know that only recently this goal was fulfilled. We remember that developed countries established on the UN conference in 1970 voluntary support for sustainable development in developing countries at the level of 0.7% of gross national income. Only a few advanced economies fulfilled that goal in 2022. In that regard, we should suggest to concentrate only on CQG, do not consider official development assistance, so we suggest to exclude from input papers Article 505 and 507, or to clarify what you mean in this article. We also would like to mention that we should not mix interpretation of financial flows for NCQG and 2.1c of Paris Agreement. In 2.1c, we should consider wide variety of financial flows, which could include not international flows, but also government support, private finance, blended finance, etc., as well as from international organization as well as in private business. We believe that every country should establish principle itself, which financial flows correspond to climate goals, which are based on national taxonomies. Certainly, these taxonomies should correspond to general international requirements. Also, there is a big temptation to mention in CQG document some ideas about transformation of international financial architecture. Despite the fact that these ideas are very variable and we support completely them, it is better to avoid such discussion in the document, so we suggest to exclude points 133, 136 in input paper. Due to the fact that input paper is too long, it's required more time for deep analysis, and we will consider possibility to submit our proposals in writing form lately. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, the Russian Federation. Next, I have Fiji, which is number 62.
Thank you, co-chairs. Fiona and Zahir, so good to see you sitting up there, doing the good work for us, and thank you for giving me the floor. Fiji aligns its statement with the one made by EOSIS and also with the G77 yesterday. Finance commitments and ambitious climate action has made delivering the NCQG a critical priority for Fiji and all developing countries, particularly SEEDs and LDCs. This commitment can rebuild trust and ensure recovery and resilience for affected economies, affected communities who are running out of time. Every year is critical, and every dialogue, meeting, or decision must lead to real action. We speak as those on the front lines, heavily impacted by climate change. Despite our ambitions to survive and thrive, our fiscal space is shrinking, and our small economies are severely affected by external shocks. Mounting debt has reduced our economic growth potential in both the short and long term. Moving forward, we recognize that the options presented in the input paper are comprehensive, reflecting all views, recognizing that elements may be added or refined as we move forward. However, we believe that further technical streamlining and removal of the redundancies is needed at minimum. The new goal should address the evolving needs of climate vulnerable communities, recognizing and reflecting the special circumstances of SEEDs and LDCs. It must be informed by scientific evidence to ensure that we remain within the 1.5 degree centigrade target, achievable through collaborative effort and spirit. We have seen this time and again, so we aren't sure why equitable burden sharing by developed countries, providing a base of public climate finance as concessional loans and grants to developing countries in alignment with the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and balancing mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage to meet our evolving needs while maintaining our target of 1.5 degrees. I thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you very much, Fiji. I don't see any other requests for the floor from parties. So we have a few minutes left before we close for today, and as mentioned at the outset, we would like, with your permission, to give the floor to observers, should any of the observer participants here wish to make an intervention. And I believe that our observer friends have a statement ready. Can you please turn on microphone 252?
Gracias por permitirnos este espacio, pero dado que este es aún excluyente con la barrera del idioma, daré este pronunciamiento en inglés para que quede claro lo importante que es tener interpretación en todos los espacios y que permita la real inclusión. Thank you for the shares for giving us the floor. Given that this space continues to be exclusive, I will give this statement in English, but hope that I will lay a foundation of the importance of having interpretation in all spaces, allowing real inclusion. I am speaking on behalf of the constituencies representing Women and Gender, Climate Action Network, International Trade Unions, Indigenous People, and Children NGO. The NCQGs is not designed to serve countries, but for people everywhere. Given the importance of the NCQG and climate finance for ambitious and essential climate action, we have come together to deliver this joint statement. We welcome the recognition of civil society inputs thus far, and we trust that our collective perspective will properly reflect in the coming iteration of the draft test structure. We would like to focus our intervention on the key priorities we want to see reflected in the different parts of the test structure. First, overarching section, preamble, context, and principles. Regarding the overarching section, we understand we compromised in preamble, context, and principles. We call for the following. The NCQG should retain the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and the obligation of developed countries under Paris Agreement to provide public finance and the substantive bulk of the NCQG while ensuring clarity on additionality. The NCQG should operationalize on human and labor rights-based and beneficiary-centered approach. It should include just transition principles and practice outlined in the Just Transition and Mitigation Work Program, including social dialogue with workers and stakeholder consultation with an stakeholder rights for Indigenous people and local communities, women and gender diverse groups, people with disability, children and youth, and other marginalized racial, ethnic, religious, LGBTIQI+ groups. We believe it is important to acknowledge the link with other key parallel processes separately addressing outside of the NCQG, including explicit reference to the Just Transition and Mitigation Work Programs, as well as the global goal of adaptation, associated agreements such as the ILO resolution and guidelines on just transition, as well as the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue on Article 2.1c. 2, quantitative and quality elements. Regarding quantitative and quality elements, the following points are fundamental to the NCQG. The quantum has to reflect the evolving needs and priorities of developing countries, addressing foremost the needs of people across all sectors and communities, including Indigenous people, workers, women, and gender diverse groups, people with disability, children, youth, and other marginalized racial, ethnic, religious, LGBTIQA+ groups. We see the NCQG as including a grand equivalent goal of sustainable public provision within a wider mobilization of climate finance for developing countries. It should be fundamentally public, grant-based, and highly concessional. We agree the need to move ahead with the specific test proposals on the quantum instead of delaying the concrete conversation by continuing to focus on other issues like the so-called contributor base. We strongly support an NCQG that is structured around clear thematic goals for adaptation, mitigation, and loss damage. with adaptation and loss damage finance being fully grant-based finance, making sure that any climate finance does not increase the debt burden of developing countries. The inclusion of the following qualitative elements is critical. Gender responsiveness of climate finance is linked very much to ensuring accessibility of climate finance, participation of local groups and communities, including women in all their diversity and non-binary people, in developed decision-making on climate finance. This must be operational linked to upgrade the transparency rules, gender responsiveness of finance provided and mobilized so far is not integrated in the ATF, but should be considered including as a start to improve voluntary reporting. So far, there is a little accountability in terms of whether and how much of climate finance is provide support of climate and gender equality outcomes. The NCQG must be aligned with the objectives of just transition that respect and promotes labor rights and upholds human rights, including social dialogue with workers and stakeholder consultation, and rights for indigenous people, women, and gender diverse groups, local communities, children, and youth to ensure that finance supports sectors and communities at risk and impacted by climate change. This includes strengthening social protection, providing for sectoral finance platforms, prioritizing decent work and safe conditions, and ensuring inclusive and effective climate resilience. The NCQG should acknowledge the need for changes in approaches and innovative sources based on divesting from military spending and fossil fuel subsidies, recognizing that this is work that should be taken forward separately under the Sharm el-Sheikh 21C's dialogue. The NCQG should have targets on access, including in terms of scale, financing provided through simplify and enhance direct access, with priority for accountability for progressively larger sums being channeled as a grant financer for local lead action, including sector platforms to ensure effective delivery of climate finance. Last, transparency. Regarding transparency, the operative section of the NCQG decision must include a strong provision on transparency with a view to improving accountability, learning lessons from the lack of transparency and accountability under the 100 billion goal. We agree that backbone of the transparency arrangements should be ATF. However, the ATF should be reviewed to encompass the quality of elements referred to above, with a new and improved reporting on loss and damage, gender and intergenerational responsiveness, just transition, grant equivalence, and debt sustainability. Transparency and accountability will only be achieved through clarifying the understanding of what counts and what needs to be excluded from the definition of climate finance. Climate finance should not include non-concessional loans and should avoid double counting and the relocation of existing development and other finance streams. We thank the parties co-chairs for running a generally transparent process thus far and will call for this to continue. We increase space for observers, particularly in the TED. We will submit this statement also in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. So colleagues, Zahir and I and the Secretariat, we've taken really good note of all of your views and your guidance. And based on your guidance, we will update the input paper, which we will make available ahead of the second session on Saturday. And for those who have not yet registered for the second meeting, we kindly ask that you do so. This is not to make the meeting more restrictive, but to ensure that the Secretariat has your email address to communicate to you the relevant information. To register, please complete the registration form, which can be accessed through the QR code displayed on the screen. In closing, please be reminded that the next session will take place on Saturday, the 8th of June, between 3 to 5 p.m. in room Genf, and the Bangkok room will be the overflow room. We encourage you to consult the CCTV for any changes to the schedule and to check your email for any announcements. And with that, the meeting is closed.